everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. And today I am here with Leon Logothetis. I got it right?
You did. You got it right. Well done.
The problem is I practice these names over and over again, and then I get it wrong when I say it live. So I just want to confirm that Leon Logothetis is here with us today. He is the host of the Kindness Diaries. Where can you find that?
Discovery Plus. It was on Netflix, but now it moved to Discovery Plus.
Okay. And the author of a book that just launched this week, Go Be Brave. So first of all, I just want to talk about your life because it's so fascinating. And then we'll get into how we apply this to teenagers. But you had an epiphany in your own life that you needed to make a change. And can you tell us a little bit what brought you to it and then what that change looked like?
Sure. So I used to be a broker in the City of London. And on the outside, I had pretty much everything you would ever want. But on the inside, I had pretty much nothing you would want. I found myself to be very depressed, a lot of anxiety. And, I wasn't really heading in the right direction. We'll put it that way. And I stumbled across the movie, The Motorcycle Diaries, which is a romanticized version of Che Guevara traveling around South America, relying on kindness. And there was something about that movie that really touched my soul. So to cut a long story short, I quit my job and I started to travel around the world, relying on the kindness of strangers. And that kind of culminated in me buying a vintage yellow motorcycle, kind of like Air Force One, but a little bit yellower. And I circumnavigated the world from LA to LA, relying on kindness. And unsuspecting good Samaritans received a life-changing gift. And that's kind of how I ended up here on your show.
Okay, so when you say you traveled, your conditions were not optimal, right? Like you did not take money with you.
Yeah, I had no money, no food, no gas, no place to stay. All I had was relying on the kindness of strangers.
And did it ever not work?
Many times. It many times didn't work. But it worked enough times for me to be able to get around the world.
Wow. That's a unique story. And I'm going to go watch some of the shows because I think the story is fascinating and what the interviews I've seen of you were fascinating. Okay, let's go to your book where Go Be Brave. Do you have a copy of it with you?
I do.
Let's share it. There you go. Go Be Brave. Who's your target audience for the book?
I get that question often. And my target audience really is anyone who feels a desire to live a magnificent life. Anyone who feels a desire and a fear that they are not living their greatest life. Someone who's felt some pain, someone who feels shame, someone who feels like there's more. And that can be from a 13-year-old to a 113-year-old. But generally, it's anyone who really wants to make a difference and really wants to change their circumstances by bravely stepping into their power. And look, the book is done in a really cool way. Well, I'm a bit biased, but whatever.
I would agree.
It's got illustrations, right? Yep. So it's more like a journal than it is a normal, simple book.
There's exercises with room to do it in there.
Exactly.
And it actually looks to me like very teen friendly. So
I was about to say that.
If you want to give your kid a gift, both a gift and a gift, I think it's a great book.
It is definitely teen friendly. I mean, the way I write is very conversational. So it's like, it's a conversational book that is teen friendly. And look, you asked me how I ended up doing the shows and everything. And I started with being a broker. But the truth is that it really started when I was a teen. When I was 15 years old, I found myself being, profoundly bullied, viciously bullied for many years. And I never really told anyone. And then one day it got to the point where it was so bad that I actually went into my mother's room and I took a risk. I define bravery as speaking our truth. And I decided in that moment to speak my truth and to share what was going on. So I went in, I told her, I had, started crying, had my little meltdown. And she was very kind and she was very receptive. And she took me out of that school. And I share that story because it was that moment of sharing my pain, that moment of bravely speaking my truth with my mother, with someone safe, that started really this whole journey that led me to do the kindness diaries.
So it's interesting because that, we think of bravery as like lifting up a car off of somebody or jumping from great heights into a beautiful water somewhere. And you're talking about the struggles that we live with on a daily basis, and moving forward in a different direction was bravery, which, as you say it sounds like bravery to me, but I don't think we typically put it under the umbrella of bravery.
Yeah, one of the first things I say in the book is I ask a question: when was the last time you were brave? And I say that, going off to war may be brave. Saving kids from a burning building may be brave. Jumping off a cliff may be brave. But the true act of bravery is being vulnerable. The true act of bravery is speaking our truth. That is the true act of bravery. So it's a little bit of a shift in definition, but it's really about being vulnerable. And as teens, it's difficult. Believe it or not, I used to be a child. And as a teen, it was very difficult to speak my truth, to be vulnerable, to believe that there was going to be someone that was going to witness me and see me. But crossing that Rubicon when I walked into my mother's room was that thing that ultimately led me to everything that I've done. And that's what I want the book to do for others, to read that book or do that journal, really, and be inspired to be like, ooh, there's a lot going on. I haven't shared it with someone. If I find someone to share it with, maybe everything will change.
It's interesting that the moment that everything changed for you when you went and spoke to your mom, but it sounds like it always went in a direction after that point that was more and more and more of that. You didn't do it once and then retreat.
Absolutely. And that's a really important point. You make that one small baby step and you keep on doing it time and time again. Like, I walked into my mother's room when I was 15. I didn't leave my job until I believe it was 28. So that was 13 years of making small little steps. Sometimes I regressed, right? But generally, I made a commitment after that moment with my mum. I was like, okay, now I was brave once, so I can do it again. And then I did it again. And then I was like, okay, I can do it again and again and again.
So you talk about bravery helping you with your anxiety and depression. What if we look at like this, your show and your travels, your abandon and just going out there without even a credit card to save yourself? Did that correlate to reducing depression and anxiety?
I mean, I think that was more exposure therapy, but it definitely it increased my anxiety, right? Like, because I'm actually a pretty introverted guy and I'm pretty shy. And as a kid, I didn't really have that many friends. So I put myself in a situation whereby I had no choice but to connect with people. And it was extreme anxiety to start with, but now I can pretty much connect with anyone. And again, it's a theory of small little baby steps and keeping on that track. And sometimes you'll fail. Sometimes you won't have the courage to take that action to speak your truth. And that's okay. But maybe the next day you will, or maybe the next week you will. Just make that commitment to speaking our truth as often as possible to someone safe. I am not suggesting that anyone speaks their emotional truth to someone unsafe, because if you do, the chances are that they will take advantage and it won't end well.
Yeah, so there needs to be trust there.
Yes.
There needs to be a relationship and trust.
Yes.
Which for teenagers can be hard because you might pick a friend who seems safe, but friendships can be volatile. So when you talk to schools and you're talking to teenagers, how do they respond to this idea of just finding one person to tell the secret, the shame that you're living with?
Look, well, before I answer that question, I'll say another way of doing it without sharing it with anyone is a journal. So inside the book, one of the adventures is called the Truth Diary. So you go and you buy a journal and you share the truth with that diary. No one else will see it. It's just you and the Truth Diary. And by letting it out, you get closer to being able to find that one safe person, because you've let out the shame, the fear, whatever's going on. So to answer the question, what do kids say to me about that, finding that one person? I think they all can relate to it, but then it's like, well, I don't know if there's someone safe, like you just said. And I guess you just have to keep going until you feel intuitively that this person's safe. Like, for example, your parent. If your parent is safe, and I hope that they are, if your parent is safe, then that's a perfect place to start. For whatever reason, if the parent isn't safe, then maybe a teacher is safe. And maybe in your truth diary, you can write a list of the 15 or 10 or 15 people that are safe. And maybe the list only has one person. And if that list only has one person, you speak to that person. And if that list has no people, then you keep on writing in the truth diary and you keep on letting it out, because the truth diary is a safe place.
It's so interesting what someone else's journey would look like toward this bravery. So when you're talking to teenagers, I imagine they like examples, right? So one of them is talking to somebody about something maybe you've never shared because you're living with shame. What are other steps that teenagers can do that maybe it's self-defining, this idea of bravery, but that would fall into that category?
Steps to do what? Sorry, can you repeat that?
So the umbrella is bravery, right? Like, we're talking about bravery. And I'm not going to get on a scooter and go around the world. And I certainly don't want my teenager to do things like that. So I hope they would come to me as a parent, and that's not their story. What's another way? Like just some kind of little ideas for things that people, and teenagers in particular, can do to take them outside of their comfort zone.
Well, for example, when I was a kid, I spent 2 years eating lunch by myself in the library. 2 years. I didn't have the courage or the bravery or the capacity to go down and eat lunch with other people. And then one day, a kid came up to me in the library and said, "Would you like to eat lunch with me and my friends?" And I had a choice to make. Do I say yes, which was a lot of anxiety and a lot of kind of emotional turmoil, or do I say no, which was the easy option? And for whatever reason in that moment, I felt like being vulnerable. So I said yes. And I went down and I had lunch with this guy and his friends. And from that moment on, things started to shift. So sometimes it's an internal meter that only you can be aware of. Like, you have to make a choice. And sometimes you can't make the right choice. That's okay. But sometimes if you read or do a book like this, it will give you the strength to be like, oh, okay, I'm going to walk a little bit outside my comfort zone. And I'm going to say yes when I really want to say no. Right? And that's what happened to me. I said, yes, I'll come and have lunch with you. But I really wanted to say no, to stay in that little comfort zone. So it's
I love the idea that every fiber in your body is screaming, no, no, no. And that bravery is just the taking that step into yes. That's easy for us to understand, right? Like, how many times a day do you think to yourself, no, no, no? And then you say yes.
Yeah, and that's one of the adventures in the book. It's saying yes. And another adventure in the book is saying no, because there's sometimes you want to say no, but you say yes. And there's sometimes you want to say yes, but you say no. So it's delicate, right?
Do you remember this kid from who came up to you in the library? Because I love that boy so much in this story.
I do remember him very well.
Yeah. I mean, even bravery is that boy, because that boy took a risk, right? So be that boy to the next kid who's sitting all alone.
Yes.
I love that. Okay. When you're talking to parents, what do you want them to take away from your interaction with them?
Well, when I'm talking to parents about the book specifically, or any speeches I may give, I want them to know that the most important thing they can do is to make a safe environment, emotionally safe environment, for their kids to speak their truth to them. Because if you can do that, the kid feels free to share the good, the bad, and everything in between. He doesn't, or she doesn't hold it in, and it won't consume them. And the longer that people keep things inside, specifically the negative things, the more pain and the more destruction they will cause moving forward. So if there's anything that I would tell a parent to get from reading this journal, is to create that, to bravely create that space for their kids to be able to speak their truth. Exactly like my mother did when I was 15. I say it again. We wouldn't be here having this conversation today if that moment hadn't happened. And that's because she created that moment for me to be able to speak my truth, my emotional truth, right? Because there are other truths as well. It's not just about your pain. It's not just about your shame. It may be, as an adult here, maybe you want to change your job. Maybe you want to start a new business. Maybe you want to do whatever it is you want to do. That takes bravery too.
I remember where I was, who I was with, the moment I said I was going to start Your Teen Media, because I knew as soon as I said it, I was going to do it. Like, it was one thing to live with it inside. That might be the bravest thing I've done.
There you go. But that's exactly what it is. That's what the
Yeah.
book is. And it's interesting because one of the adventures is at the end of the book, it's about living your big truth. What is it that you've always wanted? And you just explained, without reading the book, because I'm sure you did this before you knew the book existed, that you put your big truth into the world. And now here we are living your big truth.
Yeah. Yeah. 16, 17 years later. Yep.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I think writing it in a journal is a great first step. And maybe it gives you the bravery to do the next thing. But I've seen people do it, they put something out into the world and they can't take it back now. It's
Yes.
like, oh no, I'm doing it.
Yes. It's a little trick.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to hear about some of your experiences. Tell us, like, which one would you put at the top of transformative for you? And maybe which one with the most struggles?
I would say the most transformative was during the first season of Kindness Diaries. I was in Pittsburgh, and I was asking people to stay in their houses, and they were saying no, of course. And I went up to this chap in a park, and I said, "Hey, we started connecting." I said, "Can I stay in your house tonight?" After talking to him, of course, I didn't just go up to him like that. And he said, "Look, I'm really sorry, but I'm homeless." Didn't look homeless, but he was homeless. So I was about to walk off with my tail between my legs, and he says, "Well, if you want, you can stay with me tonight. I'll feed you, I'll protect you, and I'll give you some clothes." And every fiber of my being was like, "Leon, my good friend, you're not staying on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight." But there was that counterintuitive voice that said, "Leon, my good friend, you are staying on the streets of Pittsburgh tonight." So I did. I stayed on the streets of Pittsburgh. He did everything he said he would do. And he taught me two profound lessons. Kindness is free. It's irrelevant how much money we have or how little money we have. It's free. A homeless man taught me this lesson, which I have kept close to my heart since that day. The second lesson, true wealth is not in our wallets, it's in our hearts. Now, am I saying give away all your money? Of course not. But the truest of wealth is how we show up. The truest of wealth is how brave we are. The truest of wealth is how magnificently we decide to live our lives. That morning, I said to the fellow, I said, "Where did you feel the most loved?" And he said, "Oh, I felt the most loved at my school." I said, "Clearly you didn't go to an English school, but that's for another day." I took him to the school, and we put him up in an apartment and sent him back to school. He wanted to be a chef. So this to me was just such a profound, life-changing moment. I will never forget that moment. And in essence, it was an act of bravery from my part. It was an act of listening to my intuition, because on one level, my mind didn't want to stay on the streets, but my heart and my soul knew that I needed to. So I bravely listened to my truth and ended up staying on those streets. And my life changed. I mean, it did. It changed.
Are you still in touch
on.
with that guy?
You know, I was in touch with him for many years. Unfortunately, about 2 years ago, he died. But we were very, very close. I would, you know, he was my friend. He was the essence of the show. He was the essence of everything that I did. Tony from the Kindness Diaries. You can Google Tony Kindness Diaries, and Tony shows up. His legacy is beautiful. It is the show. He is the show.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry for that loss, and I am inspired by how you each gave each other something.
Yes.
It was mutual.
He would always say to me, Leon, you changed my life. And I would always say the same thing. No, you changed my life. And that was the truth. And that was all from him being vulnerable and from me being vulnerable. 2 acts of bravery.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I said, can you give us 2 stories? One that's inspiring and one that didn't go so well. And it's kind of this, you told us all of that in the same story, that the moment you were the most vulnerable turned out to be the moment that you had the most inspiration, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And in total of your travels, like how often do you get back out on the road and do this? Is it like the way you have a home now, right? Like you.
Yes, I have a home, thankfully. So we did a second season where we went from Alaska in the middle of winter in a 50-year-old Beetle all the way down to Argentina, which took about 3.5 months. Exactly the same premise, no money, couldn't accept money, just relying on the kindness of strangers. Prior to COVID, we were going to do a season 3, which was all 50 states. But unfortunately, the little challenge of COVID happened and that got kind of pushed back.
So you've got a camera crew with you, but you're not,
Yes.
but you're living without anything. They go out to dinner and you don't.
Absolutely. I get to connect with the people. They get to film me and stay in hotels.
Wow. Okay. So end us with something like inspiring for parents of teenagers. When you walk away from schools, what's your feeling about these kids? Are you like, they're awesome, I love talking to them, or life is a big struggle?
I mean, there's so much untapped potential, right? When I sit in front of kids, I want to inspire them to believe in themselves. I was a kid once, as I mentioned, and I had this teacher. She looked at me in the eyes every day as I was being bullied, and she said, I believe in you. I believe in you.
Wow.
And I never forgot that. And that's why I give these speeches to the kids, because I want them to feel inspired. And I want them to understand that bravery is simply speaking our truth. And they have to then take action, which is being courage, which is using courage. And if they do that, I have this bravery equation that I put up on the screen. Bravery plus courage equals a magnificent life. And that's what the speech is really about. And that's what the book is about being magnificent. And everyone, whether you're 12 or 115, deserves to be magnificent. And you get there by being brave, speaking your truth, being courageous, taking action. That's it.
Show us your book one more time. Go Be Brave. We'll get a link into the comments for people to go and purchase that. Do the exercise with your kid. Get 2 copies and do it with your kid, and then talk about it with them.
Absolutely. Do it with your kid.
Leon, thank you so much for being our guest today. Your story is fascinating, really fascinating.
Thank you so much for having me.